In the last video, we almost finished styling the settings page. The very last thing to do is style these combo boxes. So they look okay visually now without hovering over them, but you can see the little black glyph for the down arrow is not styled, and all of the intricacies in styling this now for pop-ups we can do in one dedicated video. So let's just jump in. Before we dive into that, you can see now styles are starting to get quite complicated, and all dumped in this one file isn't the best. Let's just split this out and create some new styles, and we'll do them on one for buttons. Then we'll go into here, find all the button styles and move them out, and we want to kind of make then a folder of styles almost per element. In this case, buttons will cover checkboxes as well for now, but we can cut all of them out, put them into buttons, and then in the style we could have just the buttons, which at the minute, that's what this one is. And then we can look at the rest. We've got a window, a label, border. So we want one for labels. And then specifically in this labels one, then we could have this preview here being the actual labels that we want to see. So you can do a label and do a normal label. And if we show that, you can see here normal label. We've got icon labels, and the idea will be then your previews for each style should cover every type of label as well. So if we've got an icon label, we should include it here and do icon and then icon only. We can also see the label doesn't have a foreground set by default either, so let's actually add that now. And then the icon and icon only, we probably want them to be the same as what we're actually meant to be using them for. So the way we'll do that is to search for where they are used. And we have here classes icon, and the content is icon text. And it would expect it to be set with the font. So what we could do in the icon class is explicitly set the font family, which actually it does. So all we need to do here for the icons is enter some icon text. So we'll nick, say, this one. And there we go. That's icon and icon only showing. We've got a H2, and we should have a H1 as well, I believe. So we'll do H1, header 1, H2 will be header 2. And you can see we haven't brought in header 1 yet. So is that all the label classes? Yep, so there's no more label classes here. In fact, the only thing in this window now is a window and a border. So we don't really have any generic styles. This one we can rename then as well. We'll rename this to just general. So it's literally general styles. For now, we can just leave all that in there. This could show all the styles if we wanted, or something specific. But for now, the general can now resort to just showing what it did originally. In the settings page, all of these new label styles we added here will move out. We'll dump them in here. So header 1, sub 1, header 2. We can organize them as well, so try and keep them where we want them. Header 1, header 2, sub 1. And then we should have sub 2 below. And success. And again, now we've added styles, make sure we add them to the preview. So we've got header 1, header 2, we've added sub 1 and 2, as well as success. So on top of that, we'll want sub 1, sub 2, we'll do, say, a header 1 success. You can mix them in any order you want. And there we go. You can now see all the styles and what they'll look like. You can even do a few different ones. So you could do like a sub 1 with success below, like that. What else do we have to move over? We've got text block. So let's make a new style. Text block. Put the style there. And now in here, we will want a text block, subtext, and we have a sub 1. It's a sub text block, or sub 1 text block. Preview. There we go. Same thing with text block. You can see that doesn't have the default style. For the foreground. And now it does. We've got list box. Put them in there and you're getting the idea now. We'll just go back into here, copy all that through, paste that in, change this to a list box. And then I believe, I don't know if we can show things inside the list box. We can just do a list box item, can we? Yeah, we can just dump some in like that for now. So you can see 3 different ones. And there's now the list box. There's nothing we've done specific for subclasses, so that's all we need to show here. And you can see that's working. Then we've got a text box and a combo box left, I think. So add a new one, text box, put the styles in here, copy out again, this kind of similar pattern, so we don't have to keep retyping. This can be a text box. And then we have, in this case, again, there's no specific style. So text box on its own should be fine. Some text box. We'll do, say, a password one as well. So we can see the 2 styles. And then we can see over there. Now I don't know whether we can forcefully set the hover effects. I don't know whether this would work. Yeah, it's not going to work in this preview bad looks of it. In fact, it doesn't even like that when I type it in. Yes, that doesn't like being set. That's more of a property for actually being focused. And the last one was the combo box, which we're just starting to style now. So to be honest, we will make a new style. Actually, yeah, we could just make a new style and do it in the style itself without being in the main page. So we can do a combo box. We'll take that style, paste it in here. We'll take this style, paste it in there, change this to a combo box, and I presume we can just change this to a combo box item. And then we can just do item 1, or combo box item 1, item 2, and 3. Get a preview, and you can see here then where we have everything that we're up to. So we need to finish off the styling at this point. And then before we forget now, we need to include all of these styles and remove. Oh, it's automatically updated that one where we renamed. So we have buttons, combo box, general, labels, list box, text block, and text box so far. And why is buttons not going blue? Does that still work? Just wondering why buttons isn't showing a blue underline. So nope, all the buttons are in some way messed up now. Well, I'm not sure, but that's lost its colour, its foreground. Or is that because we've now applied foreground to, yeah, that'll be because we've applied the foreground style to the label, and now the button's messed up. So let's just go and fix that. Which you can see isn't messed up here, which is the problem, but it is there, so you can kind of see. And that should be as simple, hopefully, as if it is a button, foreground, dynamic, resource. It's going to be primary background on the buttons, I believe, but then you can see the checkbox ones once the primary background as the foreground. So we probably just want to put the, oh, we've got the style there. So this style should be working to set the foreground. Let's just see if we leave that in the foreground for all buttons first. Does it kind of capture? I wouldn't expect it to. No, so it's still not captured text on the normal buttons. But just to prove what the issue is, it will be this default label style here. That because we've now set labels as default, the buttons have inherited the label. And you can see there, it's then fixed the icon label and not the other label. So it's definitely with the default styles we've added. So let's just include that default style back still, because we still want to do that. We want all labels to have that default style. But we need to fix the button style to purposely select into the labels and set the colour. So maybe we just do that. Maybe it's just as simple as if it's a button and it has a label inside, we just set the foreground colour to the background. And unfortunately not, that's still all messed up. And it's on the normal. In fact, it's the hover effects as well. Okay, so just reverting all of those changes we've done for now to try and find out at what point this button breaks, because you can clearly see we have here everything working and all the button styles work. And all we've done is convert this to separate files and then moved out the properties from the settings page, so the styles in here, these styles to their own class, and we've all of a sudden lost the inheritance. So let's try and figure out what went wrong. Firstly, I've noticed that if we bind, say, a colour here, the foreground, this issue we know about where properties won't cascade down into templates, so you can see this button isn't red. I've actually found out how to fix that now. So inside, once you override a content template, you no longer can bind styles above like this to pass down. So even though we've got it set to apparently be in the foreground, even if we put that foreground directly on, say, this label, you can see it still doesn't work. And in fact, it works in some way, but what you're getting is a completely different value. So it's not getting the foreground that's set. If we just do this and go up the chain in the binding, just like we did for the data context, change that to the foreground, and just change this to binding, not template binding, and do it that way, you can see we can now get back to having the template work. If we do the same for the content control, you can see we then get that style as well. So now we have the ability to style the classes like we couldn't before with that bug. We can now style them. So let's include that fix first. And now let's try and move these styles out. And I think that's all we did. We were just define. Oh, and now we can uncomment, and hopefully this doesn't break it. I think this is where the issue come in. If we did a default label and text block property, this is where we then saw that issue. So is that going to reintroduce the issue? Yeah, you see, so that reintroduces that issue where now the labels are white there inside. So I guess really the question is, are we doing something wrong here? Like, am I coding this wrong and this issue is coming about because of we're not understanding the selectors correctly? Or do we have bugs? Because in my eyes, you're selecting a label, which makes sense. You're going to now style a label with a specific color across the board, which is what you want. But now inside of a button, the label here is getting the foreground from this top level selector here. We're ignoring what should be the foreground, which we actually never set. So maybe we are just coding this wrong. So do we just need a style selector of the current place? And is it just because we are missing? Let's just do red for now. Or we're just missing the style on the button, which I'm guessing the answer is going to be no. So no, we still don't have it, even though we're setting the foreground color on the button, which is where I'd expect it to cascade. And this doesn't cascade down. You can see it also messes up and goes white here. So in my eyes, this should cascade down. I mean, maybe even go to template and content presenter and set the, there we go. Maybe that's going to work now. Well, it works for one half again, which doesn't fully make sense. Right, so I think we are maybe just missing this in code and I've overlooked something. So let's fix this style. We now have where we are styling red, which then should be, if we remove that and run, what we want to fix is the issue with having the default label style taking over this label style here. So it still actually didn't fix it because this wasn't the problem, this style. It's the label at the minute we've got the issue with. So this style is still overriding this style here. So can we do, inside the template, a label, which I wouldn't expect to have to do either, to explicitly go in and define a label. This should all cascade down. So at most we should have content presenter style, and then maybe foreground, template, binding, foreground. You can see this doesn't bind in. If we do orange there, you can see we can set that up manually. But binding to foreground, it doesn't bind. You can see it's also, this content is now accepting the correct binding. But that will not work either if we uncomment this and then build, and you'll lose the styling on the text as well. So I think there's an issue here really with not being able to define styles as you'd expect. We want to limit this to being if it's a text block on its own, but then how do you limit that not being inside of, content templates? There's kind of real issue here for styling. So I'm going to leave this one open to discussion for now and see if you guys can figure this out. The goal would be the ability to have this label style, which I'm going to comment out, and this text box style set as defaults, but without it affecting content presenters and content templates having, items in here. So we've got a label inside the content presenter, but you'd expect that to be the value of whatever you're passing in here. So say we have a foreground here of red. You'd expect that to pass down and in. And at the minute, that won't work. As you can see, it doesn't work there. And if we did the workaround, which was to do this binding, we can select up then to foreground color. Oh, I think I just accidentally fixed it. Oh no, there you go. You're back to this issue now, where it's almost fixed and you can pass in colors, but now the hover. So actually, maybe we did end up with a solution in the middle of all of this. But then what we're doing here now is binding to the foreground, and I bet you any money our hover effect on outline button, which is where you see this hover effect. See how we're selecting into a content presenter? This is almost like their way of maybe getting around that bug. So I bet if we copy and pasted this, removed the need to go into the content presenter altogether, and just have it on the button itself, this would effectively then match our binding, which is here, going onto the button itself, foreground. So I'll bet that now our button, if this is how we're doing the button, if this works, then I'm wondering whether that kind of content presenter setting of foreground and backgrounds was sort of a way to get around this bug. Get around this bug as well. But no, that still hasn't fixed that. So did we do it correctly? Button on hover is not a checkbox, pointer over, primary background. And is, oh, it's because we're on the wrong button. Leave that in there. We have the outline button, hover. So do we need to do it for this as well? Now does it work? And in which case, this is kind of annoying because we're going to have double styling again. And this whole styling thing's starting to become quite a big mess, to be honest. Yeah, there you go. It's fixed it. So we have found, ultimately, the issue with styles. And again, the question now becomes, why do we do this in the first place? Why have Avalonia decided that in order to set the original button colour, like this, you just set the foreground colour. But to set a hover colour, you have to do that, but then select in. But now I've done an icon button and used this binding, we can now just set it like you'd expect. So if we got rid of that, that's what you'd expect to happen. That should work. And now our icon button does. But the Avalonia controls don't without this sub-selector. So in my eyes, I'd say this would be the correct way to bind inside the content template. We could override every control and replace them with this binding, and our styles would then make a lot more sense and wouldn't need this template content presenter sub-selector. But the other issue is, if we do this sub-selector, I can't get this template to bind or work. So we have to do the correct way, which is to do it without that. Ultimately, what that now means is all of our buttons really need all of the hover effects duplicating for now, and this part deleting. And then it will work for both regular buttons and icon buttons. So we didn't even touch on what we originally planned, which was these drop-downs. Instead, we just moved over the styles, split them out, and then started finding, ultimately, this bug that we came across a while ago with this kind of content presenter template styling. So at least now this makes sense why Avalonia are doing this, and we found a way around it by doing this. All that's led us up to now is effectively exactly where we started, but with the styles split out, and more knowledge now of exactly what that means, and to have our buttons or our future controls all being able to be styled a lot more logically without template selectors. So that's it for this one, guys. I'll catch you in the next, and hopefully we'll do the drop down then.